Good morning, everybody. So, hello. I ha- I was just wondering, there is assignment due pretty soon. I hope you are all working on it. Is there anybody's having any particular difficulty with it, or is there any problem as far as assignments are concerned? Are everything okay there? Okay. So I will just wait for 2 more minutes because it's I think yet to be 2 o'clock, and then we will begin. So today's agenda is going to continue from what we did yesterday, and yeah. So we are going to actually discuss more about conditional probability. We are going to talk about independence, and we are going to see some programming examples. So starting today, you will have like a component of programming as well. So that is going to be useful. I will also um, make an announcement for the postgraduate students, PG students who are in this class, a project for them. So the postgraduate project can be done by everybody, but I'm assuming that UG students have a lot more courses to do. So that's why I just keep it restricted to PG students. So yeah. All right. So there's a good amount of people who have joined in. So let's begin. So let me just share my screen. Okay. So yeah. All right. Okay. So we will continue from yesterday. So yesterday we talked about, we just introduced basically what was called as conditional probability. So a diagram is, to think about this is like you have some uncertainty, and yeah, so you have some prior uncertainty, and then when you have some new information, you get more information, and then your uncertainty, your beliefs will change. So the example that we did yesterday was we took a Venn diagram. So originally in the unconditional space, the sample space omega is the original sample space. Now what you have here is two set of events, let's say A and B. Okay, so this is A, this is B. Now let us say somebody tells you event B happened. So you don't know exactly what element. So event B may have several points here, right? But you don't know exactly which one of them actually happened. But you know, as in general, that one of these things in event B has happened. Now what happens is your universe, what was originally the whole universe, will now be just this. So what was your original universe will become this. And now you want to ask, like, what's the chance that, what is the probability that A is going to happen given that B is happened. So this is called conditional probability. The way to read it is, you want to ask, so how do you read this? So how do you, the way to read this is, you say what is the probability event A occurs given, so this bar here is read as given event B has occurred. Okay, so now this is what we did yesterday very briefly. We couldn't spend much time on it because we were running out of time. So what we did yesterday was, we also showed that this P of A given B we defined this. So we defined this. So let me write that. So we defined this to be P of A intersection B divided by P of B. So this was a definition. Now what it turns out is that when this definition is given, whatever you would think is the intuitive understanding that given B has happened, what's the chance A also happens, the same meaning is attributed to this definition. So this definition comes because that is what makes more sense. So we will see an example that will confirm our intuition. Okay, so let's do that now. So let's take an example. Okay, so this is like a phenomenally important concept. So examples will help you to understand. Yeah, so this is a concept that you need to get adjusted to. All right. So let's consider the example where omega is got by tossing two coins. Let's say rolling two dice. Okay. Now this is our experiment. So let's do one thing. So we will just draw a table for this. This is a useful way to understand this. If you have seen the lectures, you would have seen the Sitsikis also talk about this space like this. So let's do the same exercise here. This line is not very proper. All right, so we are almost done. So what I have drawn in this diagram is basically the first. So this x-axis is basically first toss. Okay, first roll of the dice, the first dice, whichever it is. So it can have values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, and the second roll also I will draw here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So basically what you can think, this is your omega, you can think are basically each of these box is a part of the omega. So this is yours, each box is a sample outcome. All right, so let's talk about conditioning. So let us take the event. Let's take event A. So event A is basically second roll, second dice rolls to a 6. So that is event A. Let's say event B, let's say that this is sum of the two dice, right? The two dice rolled is equal to, let's say first we'll keep it equal to 5. So these are the two events. Okay, so let's first answer what is P of A and what is P of B. So P of A, okay, is basically all those outcomes where the first roll can be anything, the second roll has to be 6. So basically this is what is P of A. Okay, the first can be anything. Now since we are assuming that this is a fair dice, so every outcome is equally likely. So the first position can be taken in 6 ways. Okay, so this is going to be 6 ways in which I can have the first position. So this is something that you would have learned in counting, right? There are 6 ways in which I can choose the first outcome. So there are 6 ways, and overall if you see the grid here, there are 6 into 6, 36 ways. So this P of A is 1 over 6. Okay. Now what is P of B? So P of B is basically probability of, so your each outcome I will call it as omega 1, omega 2. So this W, this is I'm calling, even though I'm writing W, I'm writing it in this way, like like kind of curve. Okay, so this is called omega. This is a small omega. So this is omega 1 plus and omega 1 and omega 2, such that your omega 1 plus omega 2 is equal to 5. So that is what we are asking. So now how are the possible, what are all the possible ways in which that can happen? So let's, since this is a small space, let me just write the outcomes. So what is that? It's P of basically 5, right? So you can have 1 4, you can have 2 3, okay, 1 4 2 3, 3 2, and 4 1. Okay, so what is P of B? So there are 4 different ways you could have got it. So it is 4 over 36. So this is 2 over 4, 1 over 9. Okay, so far, is there any question? Does anyone have any questions so far? Is it clear what we did here? We have taken an example of a simple dice throw. Okay, so now let us try to answer what is P of A given B. Okay, so let me just not move out of this and let me try to answer P of A given B. So now your original universe was this entire grid, okay, but now I'm telling you that no, this is not the original universe anymore. The universe is such that we are only restricting to places where you have either 1 4 2 3 3 2 or 4 1. So let's just color that, right? So 1 4 1 4 2 3 3 2 4 1. So this is now the new space. Now is there any is there any place where the second dice is rolling into a 6? Is there in the 4 space that you see, does there lie an outcome where there is a 6? No, right? So basically what we are saying is this is 0 over 6, okay, because 0 over 4. So there are 4 ways to land in B, and none of the 4 ways is having an intersection with A, which is the second dice rolling into a 6. Okay, so that is why P of A given B is 0 over 4, which is equal to 0. So now in this particular thing, I just used the intuition here. What I did was I focused my attention to the restricted space where B happens, and amongst the B I looked for what's the probability that A also happens. That's what I did. Now let us try to answer the same question using the formula. So what was the formula? Let's recall the formula. So P of A given B is actually P of A intersection B divided by P of B. Okay, now P of A intersection B, what is A? A is saying second dice rolls to a 6. Now B is saying the sum of the 2 dice is equal to 5. So there is no way you will get a sum equal to 5 if the second dice rolled into a 6. So A and B are disjoint. Okay, so this is going to be 0 divided by P of B. Why is that? Because A intersection B is an empty set, and we know that probability of empty set is 0. Okay, so what this entire exercise here shows us is that you can actually use the formula itself, or you can think about this very intuitively and come up with the same answer. Okay, so is this discussion clear? This example, does it make it? I hope it makes it a little more clearer as to what it means to say when we are talking about conditional probability. Anybody has any questions here? Let me just go to the chat window and see. Okay, looks like people are all right so far. So that's good. So let's look at another example. Okay, so we will look at the same experiment, but we will now look at different A and B. So let me just copy some of this region because we will use it. Okay, so let's look at another example. So now we will change the event a little slightly. So what we had before was we will keep A as it is. So let's do that. So A is going to be the same. So A is the event that the second second dice rolls to a 6, that is A. Okay, now let us look at event B a little more differently. So the previous one was the sum was equal to 5. This time what we will do is we will say sum is equal to 7. Okay, so now let me just clear each of these boxes, because now the event B is a little different. Okay, so we know that P of A, okay, so let's write that. So P of A from previous discussion, P of B is 1 over, P of A is 1 over 6. Now let us try to look at this new event B and try to see what is P of B for this new event. So basically this is all the cases where the sum of the two dice, so the first dice throw is here, the second dice throw is here, the sum of the two is 7. So these are all the places where it can happen. Okay, so there are totally 6 ways in which you can get a sum 7. So now looking at the diagram, it is very clear. P of B, let me just use same color. P of B is equal to 1 over 6 also, because this is the ways in which it can happen. Now let's repeat the same exercise what we did before. So what was that? P of B given A we did, right? Sorry, A given B we did. So in the previous case, if you see, we looked at this. So now let us try to look at P of A given B. So what the original universe was, this entire grid now is restricted to these dark colors here, the 6 of these. Okay, and out of that I am asking what is the chance that the second dice rolls to a 6. So there are different ways in which you can get a 6, but this is the only time. So let me just emphasize it with coloring it slightly differently, so that you know this is the event where A also happens. Okay, so looking at this figure, we can easily conclude that P of A given B is equal to 1 over 6, because there is only one way in the new universe where A also happens, and there are totally 6 ways in which B happens. So 1 out of 6 ways in which A also happens. So that's why P of A given B is 1 over 6. Let's also use the formula that we know. Okay, so what was the formula? So the formula, so let's try to do the same thing with the formula. So let's pick color. So P of A given B is P of A intersection B divided by P of B. Okay, so now what is P of A intersection B? So of all this entire, now when you are writing on the right hand side, all these right hand side elements, this is in right hand side is in the original unconditional space. I hope that is clear, because there is no given in any of these statements. So basically now I am asking, in the original space, what is the number of ways in which I can have a second dice roll to a 6 and the sum being 7. So that only happens in this, right? So P of A intersection B is actually P of 1, 6. I hope this is clear to everybody. And P of B, as before, is 1 over 6. Okay, so what is P of 1 over 30, like one outcome in this 36 outcome space? It is 1 over 36 divided by 1 over 6, which is equal to 1 over 6. So basically we have looked at 2 ways in which you can compute conditional probability. One of them is using the formula, one of them is using the idea, the intuition that we have. Okay, what is the intuition saying? You change the universe. So what was originally the unconditional omega, instead of that you focus your attention to only B. Okay, is this clear? So does anybody have any questions up until this point? This is an important place, so let me know if there are any questions here. All right, so I don't hear anything, so let me just summarize again. So okay, so now let's make an observation. So let's write it down here. So observation. Okay, in experiment 2, okay, the experiment that we wrote just above, we have P of A given B is equal to P of A, which is equal to 1 over 6, right? See, P of A is 1 over 6, P of A given B is also 1 over 6. So when this happens, okay, when this happens, whenever P of A given B is equal to P of A, we say that A and B are independent. So this is again a very important concept. So basically what is the intuition here? So basically what we are saying is, even though I have new information for you, I have new information in the form that event B has happened, but that is not giving you any new information for A. Okay, whatever uncertainty you had about A, that continues to remain the same. You don't get any brand new information just because you know B has happened. Okay, so that is whenever such events are there, whenever you have A and B in this manner, you say that A and B are independent. All right, so let me give you an example which you might be able to relate. So yesterday we had talked about the IPL example, right? Let's talk about that once again. So let's go to the IPL example. Okay, so you had basically probability of CSK wins over RCB. This is what we were talking, right? This was 0.8. Okay, now one of the examples that we saw, example A that we saw yesterday, is that probability that CSK wins given that Virat Kohli takes a hat-trick. Okay, this event, what it became, because there is a distinct advantage now the RCB has, so this we took yesterday, we took it as 0.2. Okay, so these events, the probability that CSK wins and Virat Kohli taking a hat-trick, these are events which are dependent. Okay, they depend on each other. So if somebody takes a hat-trick, it is very unlikely that CSK wins. And if so, that is what is meant by dependence. So knowing that somebody has taken a hat-trick, it changes the outcome of the game. So that means it's dependent. But an example of an independent event is probability that CSK wins over RCB, given that let's say some event, let's say like Punjab wins over Hyderabad. Okay, so if you take this conditional, so given that given that Punjab wins over Hyderabad, if that is the event that you are having, it will not change whether CSK wins over RCB, right? Because these two events are independent. So this will continue to be equal to probability of CSK winning, which is going to be equal to 0.8. So this is called as an independent event. Okay, so this is the idea that you should know. So conditional probability basically is also a probability, which means it also obeys all the axioms. You can prove it. I will ask you to do that in an assignment, but you can prove it that each of the axioms that we took as axioms previously, but when you apply it for conditional probability, when you take conditional probability definition, you can prove it formally that each of the axioms are obeyed. But that aside, basically what you have here is whenever you have some event, some brand new information happening, your belief will get changed. You will have some new ideas. So here we have taken examples. One example is where the events are dependent and the other example is where events are independent. Okay, so this is all about conditional probability that I would like to emphasize at this point. Okay, so I hope this is clear to everybody. All right, so let me just save this file and we will now discuss what is called as Bayes rule. So meanwhile, if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask. All right, so let me just check the chat window to see if people have anything. None. All right. So now let's try to understand what is called as a system called as Bayes rule. So here let's take an example. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's try to understand why this Bayes rule is such an important rule. Okay, why is this important? Okay, so now you know that we are currently having a disease, COVID-19, which is going through the population. So let us say the probability that a particular disease, so if you randomly pick a person who is walking about in Goa, and then if you test that person, it's probably that that person actually has COVID is I mean, if you like properly do systematic tests, a lot of tests, and 100% if you are able to tell, maybe the probability that the person actually has the disease is 1%. So 1 out of every 100 people actually carry this disease. Okay. So this is, as I told you, this is called as prior. This is our belief about the population. So probability that the person does not have a disease, this is 0.99. Okay. Now, you have several tests. Some of the tests are not very accurate, right? So let's say you do some test, let's say call it test 1. Okay, and then you look at what is, so basically what you do is you collect all the people whom you know are having the disease. Okay, and then you test for those people how many people actually tested positive. Okay, so now this particular test that we are designing is such that it catches 95% of people. Okay, so basically what this is telling is this is correctly identifies the disease. Is this clear? So what is the experiment? So basically what I am doing is I am first picking a person at random, and the prior probability that the person actually has the disease is 0.01. Now what I do is I basically collect lots of people who have the disease, and then I administer this particular test that I have developed, and basically it identifies 95% of the people correctly. So it comes out positive. Whereas given that the person actually has the disease, sometimes the test will also be showing negative. So this is called, what you hear often in news as, false negative. Okay. So is it clear? So you have false negative here. So this is basically people who we know have disease, but because the test is not like 100% accurate, there is some, and it is, you are trying to get these tests done very, very fast. So it turns out that sometimes you get false negatives. So this is on the characteristic of people who are having the disease. But we should also look at the other side, right? We should also look what happens to people who don't have the disease. So basically for people who don't have the disease, sometimes even though they don't have the disease, okay, with some probability, let us say with probability 0.1, okay, with probability 0.1. So it's not very frequent, but 10% of the people who don't have the disease actually test positive. So this is called as false positive. So how do we estimate this number? Basically what you do is you take lots of healthy individuals. To these healthy individuals which whom you know are healthy, you administer this test, and sometimes you will get positive, and then you can estimate, okay, this is the characteristic of this particular test. Okay, and then also we do the correct identification. So basically, people who don't have the disease should test negative, and suppose that one, since this is 0.1, that will be 0.9. Okay, so as you can see, basically, so what we have assumed in these two statements, so this is, let me write this, so this is correct identification. Okay, what we have, if you observe carefully, note, so P of plus given disease plus P of minus given disease is equal to 1. Okay, P of plus given disease complement plus P of minus given disease complement is equal to 1. And this is because conditional probability. Why this happens? Because conditional probability is a probability. So it obeys. Okay, so this is like P of A plus P of A complement is equal to 1, right? If you have done your assignment, you will see this, you know this. So similar to that, even conditional probability also obeys all these laws. Okay, so far is the setup clear to everybody? Yeah. Okay. You can say like that, but since there are 4 parameters, which one of them will you call it as accuracy? So basically what we call this is actually called as the formal language for this, okay, is called class conditional probability. Okay, it's also called as likelihood. Okay, so this is called as prior, this is called as class conditional probability or likelihood. Okay, so you are asking about basically the name, but I'm asking, like, is the idea okay to you? Do you understand the formal setup what we are discussing right now? Is this clear? Okay, very good. Any other questions? So names are important, but but for this current setup that I have written, they are called as class conditional probability or likelihood. So you will learn these things more when you do machine learning, but anyway. Okay, if the setup is clear, so this is not how you would do, right? See, the purpose of the test, if you already know that somebody is diseased or not diseased, that is not how the whole purpose is. We don't want to do that. What we are interested other way is the other way. Our interest is P of what is the probability that the person has the disease given that he is tested positive. This is what is our interest. Okay, and this is called as posterior. Okay, or it's also called as an inference problem. So it's posterior or an inference problem. So basically what you have here, these 4 numbers, these four guys, 1, 2, 3 and 4, they are the test characteristics. But what we are interested is that we want to know what is the probability that somebody has the disease given that he is positive. That is what we are interested in. We don't want to, these 4 numbers are not really useful, but we can calculate these 4 numbers easily, right? Because we can do a controlled experiment and calculate this number. But our interest is what is the probability that somebody actually has the disease given that he has tested positive. Okay, so that is what we would like to know, right? Because tomorrow, let's say I catch an individual who is going from one state to another. Let us say he's going from Maharashtra to Goa, and then we administer the test to this person, and the test comes out positive. Now we have to decide whether we are putting him in quarantine or we are allowing him to go inside. So that is why this number is important. Okay, this is what we used to decide national policies, right? Whether to do lockdown, this, that, all these things comes because of that. So this is what we want to do. Okay, so let's use whatever we know and try to derive the Bayes rule. So basically what we have to do is, what is the probability that the person has a disease given that he tests positive. So this we know is probability that he has the disease and he tests positive, okay, divided by probability of testing positive. Okay, so this is what we have to compute. Okay, so now let us try to break each of these components and try to answer that separately. Okay, so let me slowly explain. Okay, so let me draw a Venn diagram here for helping all of you. So no, this Venn diagram is not useful. So let's use what we know already. So we know one thing, right? So we want to compute this. So let me put a box over it so that we know we have to get to this. Okay, we have to somehow come to this. So we know one thing. We know that probability that we know these numbers, positive given disease, this we know. And this again is probability that somebody tests. I mean, this again, I'm using the definition. The only difference between this and the one you hear is that you have probability of D here. So this is all the definition. There is nothing new I have done. Okay. So now using this, we can estimate the numerator. Can you see that? Therefore, probability that you test the numerator's value, this is equal to P of D into P of positive given D. Is this clear? It's just a algebraic manipulation that I have done here. Okay, please pause me here if this is not clear. Right? So this is okay. So this is going to be P of D into P of positive given D. Now we have to estimate the denominator as well. So let us try to estimate the denominator. So people, who are all the people who will test positive? So basically people who test positive either have the disease or they don't have the disease. Okay. So this is equal to probability that you have the disease and you test positive. Okay. This is one group. Union. You test positive but you don't have the disease. These are all the people that are there. Is this okay? So who are all the people who test positive? There are people who have the disease. There are people who don't have the disease. Probability of testing positive is actually composition of these two disjoint sets. Okay. So these two things, this guy here and this guy here, they are disjoint. Why? Because you have D and D complement. Okay. So we can write this as probability that this plus this is now the axiom, probability axiom that we have been discussing many classes. So using that we get this. Okay. Now we are done, right? Because if you see, we have already estimated this number. So this is probability of disease into probability of positive given disease. The same way we can write probability of disease complement into probability of positive given disease complement. Okay, so now we can put all of these things into the formula. But before that, I would like to know if there are any questions up to this point. Is this okay, guys? All right. So that is good. So now let's put in the numbers. So when you put in the numbers, you have probability of disease, probability of positive given disease, plus probability of disease complement into probability of positive given disease complement. So all the things we have put. Now we have all the details necessary to compute our probability. Okay, so let us do that. So we will use the details that we have and try to answer. Okay, so what is the probability of disease is 0.01. Okay, so let us do that. So probability of disease given that somebody tests positive is equal to probability of disease. What is the, so I'm applying here, okay, probability of disease is 0.01. So this into, what is the probability that he tests positive given that he has disease is 0.95 divided by 0.01 into 0.95 plus 0.99 into 0.1. So can somebody do the calculation and tell me what's the value? Anybody? Okay, let me do it. So 0.01 into 0.95 divided by 0.01 into 0.95 plus 0.99 into 0.1. Yes, sir. What's the answer? Okay, so that's correct. So the answer that you get is 0.087. Okay. So basically what we are saying is that even though somebody has tested positive, if the tests have these characteristics that you see on your screen, even if somebody tests positive for that test, we cannot conclusively say that the person is actually having the disease. Okay. So that is what this is showing. So it's very important that these false positive and false negative rates have to be low. Otherwise, you can make no use of the test. So is the Bayes rule clear? Yeah. Yes. So that is basically that particular number. What you can think is like, this is how the disease has spread. Suppose if that is what is known to you beforehand. So what, again, how do you estimate this? Let us say how you are supposed to do this. So this you can do by actually taking a bunch of people at random. You take them to a testing facility. You repeatedly test that. Don't just rely on your unsafe test. You do CT scan, you do this, you do that, and confirm what proportion of the people are actually having the disease. Since you did a random sample you picked, you are able to say, okay, this is what is the disease prevalence in the community. So that's how we get P of D and P of D complement. Is that okay? Exactly. Not using this test. But see, once the disease starts spreading, this number keeps changing. It's evolving. But for a given point in time, what is the conclusion we can draw? That is what we are saying here. Given point in time, what can we say? All right. Okay, very good. So that is all about Bayes rule. Okay. So let us now look at some programming things that we can do with this. Okay, so the first thing that all of you have to do when you have the time is to install a package called as Anaconda. Okay, Anaconda, this one. So this is a package that works for both Ubuntu as well as like Linux systems as well as Windows systems. Okay, and I recommend you that you start using Ubuntu whenever possible also, because there are many features that comes with Linux systems which is not there in Windows. So slowly try to make that switch. Okay, it's important that you take backup before you do any of these things, because you may lose data. But whenever you do that, just carefully try to move to Ubuntu. You will see that later on you will be thankful when you do that. So install a package called as Anaconda, and then you can open a tool called as Anaconda Navigator. Okay, so maybe if you have any doubts about this, you can ask me, or you can ask the TS. So in the Anaconda Navigator, uh, which is not this, where is this? Yeah, so it opens up into a tool like this. There is basically one place called as Jupyter. Okay, there is Jupyter. There is also something called as Spider. Okay, so Jupyter and Spider. So these details you can watch in the YouTube video that I will upload following the lecture. So you can see that these details in that. So it's recorded in internet. So you have Spider and Jupyter. So you have to launch Jupyter. So when you launch Jupyter, it will open up a tool, a browser window like this, and then you can create new Jupyter files. Okay, so you will have, I will for the next assignment you will have to do some Python programming, and for that you need to use Jupyter. I don't know if some of you have any issues, so if there are any problems, you'll let me know immediately and we will see what we can do. But if you have an access to a system, if you can install Anaconda and if you can install Ubuntu, try doing it, and open Ubuntu, open Anaconda, launch Jupyter, and then you basically start creating new Jupyter files. That when you come, you will have a screen like this. Okay, so this is basically Python. Python is embedded along with, you can put some comments like this. Okay, so this is something new. I think in YouTube you will have a lot of videos explaining this. I will try to find something that you can watch to just get the basics on this. But you can then do some of your programming assignments with this. Okay, so just to get you started, like try to make you understand how you can do Jupyter notebooks. So these are called as Jupyter notebooks. I have created 4 examples, and we'll go through all the 4 examples right now. Okay, so the first example here is basically how do you estimate bias of a coin. So basically we have been discussing so far that there is a coin, we are doing a toss, all these things we have been discussing, right? So you can actually do, instead of you can actually do the coin. I mean, you sit with a coin and you keep tossing it, and then you can estimate how many times you get a head, how many times you get a tail. But you can also do all of these things in programming. Okay, so the thing to do is you have to write these bunch of lines that you see here. Okay, so this first line is importing a package called as NumPy. Okay, so you import that package called as NumPy as np. Now this is the bias of the coin. So if it was a fair coin, if it was a coin that is used in IPL, this bias will be 0.5, but I have chosen the bias to be 0.2. Okay, now what we are doing in the next 2 lines is I'm actually doing the coin toss. Okay, so if you see line number 1, this is the number of tosses that I am doing. So I have fixed the number of tosses as 100. Okay, now this particular line that you see is going to do the toss 100 times. Okay, and what it gives is basically a number uniformly between 0 and 1. So let me write these things, because I think it will get kind of overwhelming if I don't explain. I think there is somebody has a question. Let me check that quickly. Okay, good. So what you have is np dot random dot rand of, let's say I give 10. So what it does, this particular function, what it does is it gives you 10 numbers, okay, picked uniformly between 0 and 1. So it picks 10 numbers which is picked uniformly between 0 and 1. So this could be numbers like 0.1213, 0.3477, something like this, 0.5822, 0.6377, something like that. You will get 10 numbers. Okay. All right. So that is the first statement. So coming to the example, okay, that's the first statement. Now what I am doing is so here there are 100 such numbers which are picked between 0 and 1. These are the 100 numbers that I am picking. So instead of 10, I have given n samples, which is equal to 100. Okay, let's just wait. Somebody has a question, looks like. No? All right. So instead of 10 samples, I have 100 samples. And now what I'm doing here is basically this particular statement that you do see here is called list comprehension. If you have learned Python properly last semester, you would know this. If not, you can still learn. You can ask me if you have any doubts. I can point you to some resources. Comprehension. Okay. So what this is doing is it looks at all the 100 samples. If the number is between 0 and 0.2, okay. So what it does is if the number is less than your 0.2, it outputs 1, else it outputs 0. So now if you look at this, right, whenever you have between 0 and 0.2, you get a 1. So that is like doing a coin toss with bias equal to 0.2. Is it clear? Because since it is a uniform number picked between 0 and 1, whenever it falls between 0 and 0.2, it is like that is the times when you will treat that output as heads, and between 0.2 to 0.8 you will treat the output as tails. Okay, so there is a bias in the coin. It's not giving heads same number of times as it is giving tails. Is that all right, people? Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm doing 100 coin tosses in this manner, and I'm basically printing the number of coin tosses. Okay, so the bias was 0.2. The probability of getting a head was 0.2. So you are doing 100 tosses. You ideally expect 20. So why did we get 23? Is there something wrong here? Yes, is there anything wrong happening? Why did we get 23? Anybody? Yes, and it is random, right? Sometimes even though the bias is very bad, sometimes you are lucky, you get more heads. Sometimes even though the coin is fair, you are unlucky, you get less. So as whatever he said, if I run all of this again, so if I run all the things again, next time I may get a different value. So now I got 21. So previously I got 23, now I got 21. Okay, so whenever you are trying to estimate something which is random, you cannot do the experiment just once. You have to repeat this multiple number of times. So that is what we have done in second example. Okay, so in the second example, I have created a function here which is going to do a coin toss. Okay, okay, let me not make things complicated for you by giving this. Okay, so I have basically created a function which does the coin toss, and then it returns the probability, like the number of proportion of times you got a head. Same thing, whatever was there in the first example, instead of that I have defined that as a function. Don't worry, I will share this code with you at the end of the class, so you can go through it at your own time. Okay, so just try to understand what I'm saying here. So basically, whatever this tossing the coin thing was there before, I have put it in a function. That's what you mean when you put a define. Okay, and then what I did was I have created an array of size 3 and I run this thrice. Okay, so this is basically, instead of doing once, I ran it thrice, because that is what you're supposed to do. Whenever you're trying to do a random experiment, try to report some result, you cannot do it just once because it is random. So when you run it twice, as you expect, there will be 3 different values that you get. Okay, so now what we try to do is we try to see if there is any pattern in the answer that we are getting. Okay, so instead of running it thrice, here we will run it 1,000 times. We are running the coin toss experiment 1,000 times. Okay, so each time we are going to do a sample of 1,000. So So 1000 into 1000 coin tosses are happening here. So I will share the code. You will understand what's going on. Just go through it step by step. You will understand better. Now what we do is we plot the histogram. Okay. So basically what you can see immediately is that the histogram is centered around 0.2. That was the bias we chose. Okay. If I make it 0.3, this will shift to 0.3. Okay. And you get what is called as a bell curve. Okay, this is something that will come again and again. This is what is called as the central limit theorem. You will learn this again and again. Anyway, for now you just understand that if you have to estimate something random, if you are doing a random experiment, you have to repeatedly run it, then only you can make any conclusions. All right. So this is to get a, so basically you expected an answer 0.2, you do get an answer 0.2, but you get a bell curve. Okay, and it's centered at 0.2. So this is how you estimate basically any random experiment. This is, you have to run it multiple number of times. So similarly, I have two other examples. So let me just quickly go through it. The first example is using Bayes rule. Okay. So suppose that 5% of men and 0.25% of women are colorblind. Okay, so this is kind of a problem for which you have to use Bayes rule. The formula is like you know the formula now, you understand the concept. You can do this in two ways. The first way is you can actually write down the numbers and compute it. What I have in the code here is basically I am doing a simulation. So this entire exercise that we are doing here is called a simulation. Okay, let me write that. So simulations. So what are the simulations we saw? The first simulation that we saw was estimating bias of a coin. Okay. The second simulation that we are doing is estimating conditional probability. Okay. So it's a very easy simulation. So let me see if I have time to go to it. I don't think I have enough time. So what I will do right now is I will share all the four Python files with all of you. I will create a short YouTube video explaining this particular example 3 and example 4, not more than 5 or 10 minutes. And then I will share that as well with you. And I will share some other videos that you can watch for this week. All right. So yeah, so I think this simulation as a topic takes a while for you to get accustomed with, to get comfortable with. So at this point, like when you are doing these simulations, when you are trying to do this, if you have any questions, please approach me or the TA, and we can spend some, like we can create special classes, or even some within our Monday, Tuesday classes, we can have a programming part to explain that. So depending upon how many students have problems, so you do let me know once you see all these videos if they have any questions. Okay, so today let me just recap what we did. So we had looked at let me just open the first things. So we had looked at the conditional probability. We saw a couple of examples. We understood what is an independent event. So that was the first part of the lecture. Then we looked at Bayes rule. Okay, so that was second part. So we looked at Bayes rule. We understood that we can use it to get inference and estimate probabilities using the Bayes rule, and we saw an example there. The third part of what we did today was basically simulations. So for that you need to get comfortable with Anaconda. So the detail, this is the place where you can download it. And then once you open the Anaconda Navigator, you have this Jupyter Notebooks. You launch this. When you launch it, it opens a browser window. In the browser window, you can do these things. So there are some tutorials explaining this. I will try to share that as well. So let me note it down. Okay, so in the in the thing that we discussed in the Jupyter, we saw some coin toss. We tried to estimate what's the probability of getting some heads. We fixed the bias beforehand, but let's, with that bias, how do you do a toss? That's what we were doing. and then we saw that if you do different times, you will get different values, because these coin tosses are random. So but there is a pattern in the randomness. That is the beauty of this subject. There is a pattern in the randomness, and the pattern that you keep seeing again and again is this bell curve, which is also called as a normal curve or a Gaussian curve. So this keeps happening all over the place. Okay, we will study this further. It's also called a central limit theorem. Then we have two more examples which I didn't have time to go through. This is basically examples of conditional probability, which I will discuss in a short video I will share with all of you later. Okay, so at this point, are there any questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, then we can split for today. So for the PG students, the project, again for that I will make a short video and I will announce the project that way. UG students are of course welcome to go through that if you want, but it's primarily for this one. Okay, so for NumPy library, I think I will make some videos. Okay, all right. So let me try to find some useful videos to share. Okay, so this week I think what we will do is we will do basically, I will give you some videos to watch which are focused on experimentation. All right. I mean, I will share whatever is there in YouTube, so I wouldn't have to do any special work for that, but there are plenty of good resources. I will point you out for the right direction. All right then, so if there are no other questions, nothing, so let's meet next week. Next week on Tuesday, we will have a quiz during the last 20 minutes. Okay. All right. So let me know if you have any questions over email as well, so we can do that. Okay. Have a nice lunch. All right. Bye. So Varun, the TA will help if there are any NumPy doubts. Okay, so you can message Varun as well.